Thank you very much. Hi, Tim. Hi, Francis.
Hey.
Hi, Stephen.
All right. Hopefully my questions aren't going to be too boring. But what we're going to do is I'm going to throw two questions to one of you and then two questions to the other. So there's a little bit of
Okay.
a back and forth. And just feel free to jump in if you've got something to add to your question or someone else's question. You know, let's just kind of keep it nice and easygoing. So, Tim, I'm going to start with you. What was your first impression when you heard they'd cast Daniel Radcliffe as you?
Well, I guess it came as a bit of a shock, you know. We've been trying to make this film since I wrote the book in 1987. So I've been through about 6 or 7 5-year contracts, and none of them have ever got to this stage. So when they mentioned that Daniel was going to play my part, for the first time I realized there really is going to be a film this time. You know, you don't sign up an actor of that caliber on the back of something that's not real. So that's when I knew it was really going to happen. And then
I know films take quite a long time to gestate, but I'm actually the thing that shocked me the most was the fact that I hadn't actually heard your story before. And to me, it's one of the most amazing jailbreak stories of all time, let alone, within the South African context. So
yes.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that I got to hear about it.
Okay. Yeah, it's a different kind of escape from your average prison break. Normally there's digging a tunnel or there's some explosives or something like that. So this is a very technical escape. And of course we weren't criminals, so we didn't want to and didn't have to tie up or use violence or anything like that. So it's a very clean escape, very technical and planned escape, which is not usual.
The way I described it was a bit like MacGyver meets The Shawshank Redemption in terms of the ingenuity and the sort of not using guns and also just the sort of old school flavor with a lot of the activities that were happening in the prison. And then my second question is, you were quoted as saying you were impressed with the authenticity of some of the film's key scenes. Which one in particular stands out for you?
Well, I guess the ending, the actual breakout, the final break of the final door, that's pretty accurate. It's pretty much how it was, you know. He captured the tension very well. He captured the characters very well. It was first me trying to open this thing. And of course, it was a moment of great tension and everybody was very impatient. And I guess if I had been there on my own, I would have managed to open that door, but with two people over your shoulder, exactly the way shown, it wasn't so
Extra
easy.
morale. Yeah.
You know, so I felt the pressure, and my reaction was, "No, guys, look, we've failed. Let's go back. It's not the end. We can get back into ourselves." And it says that in the film, so it captures the whole moment very, very accurately. Sure. And also just the running after we get out, the three of us running across the bridge. That's exactly how it was. So that end bit is very accurate.
Okay. And Francis, I mean, you obviously were so critically involved in the whole process. And, how did you become attached to this project?
It's a very long story, but to cut it short, I met two British producers, Mark Blenny and Jackie Shepherd, back in 2012. And they had actually lost the rights to the book, Tim's book, but then said, what kind of stuff do you like? So I kind of said, I love political thrillers, I like politics, and that was what I was going to study originally, and I like French cinema and things. So those two things. They said, we had this book, Inside Out: Escape from Pretoria Prison, by this chap called Tim Jenkin. Have a read. And read the book and just got my highlighter pen out, and I was just all kind of cool stuff. And then again, to cut a long story short, Tim was approached again, and then the rights came back, and we started sort of taking the process of turning the book into a feature film script.
And this is your first feature film. What was the most daunting part of actually taking on this prison break thriller?
With a lot of the vicissitudes and problems we had, it was the actual artistic feat of making a film was kind of subordinate to the technical. You've only got 29 days to shoot. We had to kind of move the whole production 6 months before shooting. The budget went over 4 days into shooting, so we had to sort of cut scenes and lose extras and things like that. So you were kind of constantly for about 12 months before, kind of trying to be a cat of nine lives and land on your feet. So that was such a all-consuming exercise in terms of trying to keep the ship, kind of floating, keep the show going, that you didn't really have enough time to sit and kind of eulogize about, what do I feel is difficult about this, because you're just trying to sort of stay above water, but many filmmakers say the same thing. Yeah, I think just the logistics, just trying to keep the heart of the film alive when everything was at one point sort of trying to fall apart.
I suppose that's the thing with directing and problem solving. They go quite sort of hand in hand.
Yeah, what's interesting is, here's what I think. You tend to think artistic merit is about sitting in a room and extemporizing about, art. Actually, what film does is it synthesizes the artistic and the practical. So when you've only got 1 hour to shoot a scene that should take 4 hours, the quality of the choice that you make determines, I feel, how good one's balance is of that technical versus artistic. Because some people have great art, but they crumble if they've only got half an hour to shoot. Whereas some people can use that and say, right, we'll put the camera over there and we'll shoot it in one take. And that is artistic. So I think Obstacle can actually produce an artistic result, in a way that nothing else can.
Yeah, and just going back to Tim now, what was the most painful memory of returning to this period in your life?
Well, not the escape as such. That was almost the highlight of it. That was the fun part of of the period, was getting out of the prison. But it was, I suppose, the period of getting into the prison. I mean, what led up to it from the moment of our arrest until we arrived in Pretoria. That was the most traumatic, painful part of it, because that involved obviously arrest and then interrogation and solitary confinement, and under the security laws at the time they could hold you indefinitely, so you didn't know what was going to happen next. They just would hold you and then they wouldn't interrogate you for a few days, and then you start to have a nervous breakdown and you're going crazy because you're not allowed to read anything. And so that, and above all, it was really the embarrassment of it, the feeling that we'd failed, that they'd beaten us, that we'd lost, we'd been captured, and we saw it as ourselves as war captors, not as criminals who've been caught doing something bad, which is a different thing, because then you're supposed to feel remorse, or you say, oh well, too bad, we got caught. But we didn't feel like that. We thought, oh no, we've let down our side. This is terrible. What are we going to do about it? So that's really where the motive for the escape came, right from the beginning, from the very moment of being captured, yeah.
That overarching responsibility was really with you.
Yes.
And, the prison was known as White Man's Robben Island. What's been the biggest challenge of being a white struggle hero?
Well, it only really came much later on, I was very proud of what I did. I never for a moment felt shame in being an ANC operative for 25 years. It was only in sort of latter years, under the Zuma era, then it became almost a little embarrassing to say that I worked for the ANC for 25 years. But the way I explain it is that the ANC of that time is not the same organization that exists today. It kind of got hijacked by, the wrong people. So I almost say, well, the ANC sort of ended after 1994, during, or perhaps while Mandela was the president. Then after that, something went wrong. So then it became a little difficult, but I just kept saying, well, I'm proud of what I did, and I would never have done anything else, and I think it was the right thing to do. We were fighting against apartheid. I wasn't fighting for a political party. I was fighting to end this terrible, racist, monstrous regime and wanted to see a better world. And what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Mm.
And Francis, just coming back to you now, how did you make the story your own?
Very good question. When you see it when you read a script. The same thing when I read Tim's book. It's like, what are the first sensations that come to your mind, and first things that you think of, and then you sort of go, yeah, and then you kind of, to some degree, try and work consistently to sort of capture that. For some reason, a lot of 1960s French cinema and French escape movies came to my mind. There's one called Le Trou by Jacques Becker, about 6 men in a prison who decide to escape, making a hole. And there's another Robert Bresson film called A Man Escaped, Condamnement Échappé. Again, and the thing that I think was connected was the attention to detail. If it took 11, 12 minutes to see him get a spoon and chisel a hole, then that's what you did. And when I watched those kinds of films, I felt that kind of, rather than guts and just kind of, but sticking with it, you felt as if you were really in that room with them. So I felt that was important to try and really immerse the characters. In the film, we don't jump around all over, but oftentimes with the main character. So that kind of specificity was something that I was quite keen to sort of make sure that the performance and the camera married each other. So you saw that the audience felt as if they were in that cell or in that corridor with the guys. That was one thing anyway.
I thought that essence really came through in the way you put the visuals together. It did have a meticulous feel, as though you're almost mimicking what the character was going through in just the patience and the trying to unlock scenes and the building scenes into suspenseful moments.
I like that.
So I thought you did a great job.
We also used we also use a lot of in-camera techniques. There's one scene where Dan leans in front of the camera and he puts a key in, and that's a false perspective key. So when you look at the key sideways, it's about this big, even though in real life it's about this big, and it tapers off, so it's really big at one end and small at the other. So when he takes it and turns it, it looks as if it's the right size, and then we put the camera on a sort of circular rotator so that the whole camera rotates. Made the inside of a lock that was 4 times the size of a real lock and had a special lens, So we were trying to be very kind of organic and very sort of earthy rather than using CG, specifically because, again, the film is very physical, so we wanted the camera techniques to be physical as well.
And that fluidity definitely came through. What was it like directing Daniel Radcliffe? Did you give him much freedom as an actor?
Well, yeah, I mean, everything was, when you try and be very faithful to an idea, now a kind of a way of a style, then that overall language of the film can inform, what's going on. So the stories about structure and about methodology, the blocking and camera techniques are also sort of faithful to that kind of methodology, and therefore the acting sits within that. So yeah, I mean, Dan, we did stick quite close to the script, in terms of dialogue, but Dan had freedom in terms of some of positions. We talked to Tim about one scene where the boys hide a certain necessary product on their person, let's say, without spoiling anything. And Tim, informed us about how that really felt. We were going to play that, with grunting and sort of contortions. And Tim was like, actually, in reality, it was much more, smooth, the process. And we took that, and Dan said, I love that. I'm going to sort of play it that way that Tim said it really happened. So we did do quite a bit of that, to try and give it a sort of authenticity and capture sort of what really happened.
Okay. And Tim, when did you feel that your sacrifice as an ANC activist was truly realized? I know that you said you weren't doing it specifically for the party, but more for against the regime. So within that context.
Well, I guess the 1994 elections, it is, I very proudly stood in that very long queue to go and vote, and I did vote for the ANC, of course, and I felt very proud doing that. But I was just a person standing in the queue, and no one knew me from bar of soap. But I felt good, it was fantastic. And then afterwards, I was working in Shell House at the time, and we were monitoring the results coming through, and it was just incredible, the number of votes for the ANC. And it was sort of like, the remnants of the apartheid regime were still kind of quite outspoken and thought they were going to get lots of votes, and the ANC would maybe just beat them by 1 or 2 votes, and then it was this totally overwhelming defeat for them. So that was sort of the highlight of it. So yeah, it made it worth it, I felt, to see Mandela, then the president. I'm very proud of that. Mm.
I understand you kept the chisel as a memento. Do you ever think of what would have happened if door number 10 had not been able to be broken?
Yeah, that chisel is crucial. Although it's not a key, it was actually you could see it as a key. So the moment that chisel hit the door frame of that door, there was no going back, because, well, even if we couldn't have got out, maybe we chiseled and then found that we couldn't ever open this door, we would have gone back to ourselves. It was all built into our plan that this whole thing was reversible. And we could have got back and we would have destroyed all the evidence from our side, got rid of all our keys and everything. And they would have arrived in the morning and scratched their heads and said, why is this door broken? People don't break into prisons. And especially if the damage is on the inside of a prison, they could only come to one conclusion, that someone had got there and tried to break out. So that would have been the end of the escape saga, because there was no other way to get out other than through the front door. And they would have probably put some metal electronically controlled device in its place, even if they couldn't point a finger at anyone. So once that chisel hit the doorpost, there was no choice but to go forward. So it was a very, very tense moment, and we had this tiny little window. It was about 5:30 in the evening, and we knew from our intelligence that a guard came on duty at the gates immediately outside at 6 o'clock. So we had half an hour to break open this door. And so it was very, very tight, and we didn't know, of course, how long it would take. But fortunately, we brought some good tools with us and were able to force it open.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lizzie. Francis, do you think it would have been a better film if you'd been able to film in South Africa?
I think the thing that was most important was keeping the spirit of it. As you know, up until 6 months before, I'd gone to meet Tim, and we'd kind of booked our sets, and I'd got to meet crew, and we'd sort of started booking crew. So it's like, what? Suddenly everything gets pulled away from you. But films are like that. For me, the option of not making the film or making it in another country was kind of clear to me. People have mentioned before that they hadn't heard this story before, so the film had to get made. We put all our eggs into making it into South Africa, and kind of fought quite bitterly to have that prized away from us. But then it was like, okay, well, that's not possible. So should we just not make the film, or should we move? And so I think you can make the argument that the film obviously would have been. We would have had Tim on hand for more time. We would have had South African cast and crew who would have been able to be incorporated. There would have been places, maybe real locations we would be able to use. But in filmmaking, you don't always get the tools that you want. You get the tools that you've been handed. And so with the tools that we've been handed, a city that looks as close as possible to Cape Town and Pretoria, an offer to sort of plug the gap financially, and other elements. We had to sort of go, well, these are the tools you've got, take it or leave it. And I wasn't prepared to leave it, and so I had to sort of just, we all had to sort of use it together. It was lovely having Tim being there. the one or two other South Africans were able to sort of get in to be part of the cast and the crew. So we did pulled as much as we can in, but you know, with the tools we've got, I think what's important is that this story about these amazing South African men is now gone global. You know, we were #1 in the box office in Korea, and #5 in Taiwan, and top 6 in Vietnam, and we're about to go large in sort of across Latin America. So people are hearing about this story, and then they can go on Wikipedia and find out more about apartheid and about that time. So I think it's still worth a lot, you know, even though it wasn't shot in the home country. It's still telling this African story. I think that's important.
Yeah, there's a universality to the themes, and I think it's going to resonate with anyone around the world. You know, it doesn't matter where it was filmed. It's such a powerful story. And then lastly, you know, I jokingly said that the film could have been called Cold Sweat just because of how many times those situations come up. Which sequence are you most proud of?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of tension in there. Yeah, and I think, you know, that's in many ways true to the spirit of the escape attempt. You know, the thing is inherently tense. You read Tim's book, if you get hold of it, Inside Out, Escape From Pretoria, and you're just like, I'm like, really? And you're just watching it, you know, and he goes into detail, then comes out, and then goes back in. So the thing's inherently tense. You know, to be honest, there's a scene where, I call it the Christmas scene, where it all comes to a head, and the sort of escape attempters are against, you know, those who think that actually it's best to stay inside, and the viewpoints for the advantages for or against escaping sort of all bottleneck. And I think that's one of my favorite scenes, actually. It's not, you know, one of the most tense. There's lots of, you know, it's not very tense, but tense, but a different way. But I think what you realize is that, you know, everybody is contributing towards this, and everyone believes as fervently that their way, you know, is right. Yet, you know, at the end of it, they remain friends. And at the end of it, they remain sort of on one side, you know, kind of fighting for the same thing. So I kind of love that scene, the performance and the way they sort of go with it. Is one of my favorite scenes. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.